This is Creepy and Geeky, a part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, we're continuing our look at horror movie trilogies. This week, we're talking about the Blair Witch movies, and joining me for this episode is Angel Krause. Angel is the host of the Voices from the Mausoleum YouTube channel, where she talks about all kinds of horror stuff, including movies, books, and video games. Welcome back to the show, Angel.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me again. This is a good one to talk about with me.
Yeah, you're a found footage aficionado. So I had to get you on, especially for, the arguably the biggest one of them all. Blair Witch, the Blair Witch Project, which is, the one that kind of started it all. I know there were ones earlier than that, but realistically, Blair Witch is what, made them popular. So
yeah, definitely pushed it into a more mainstream, more modern audience for sure.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
So but yeah, so we're talking Blair Witch, the original Blair Witch Project. We're talking Book of Shadows, and we're talking about the 2016 Blair Witch, the sequels, sort of. I mean, it is a sequel. It's a sequel to the original Blair Witch Project.
Like a continuation.
Yeah. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and start with the original Blair Witch Project, which came out in 1999, and like did so well. It's like it was. I don't know if it's still, but it was for a long time the most profitable independent movie of all time, because they barely spent any money on this and made hundreds of millions on this. And it's interesting though, because, and I want to get into it a little bit farther, but most of the actors haven't really done a lot since then.
Right.
One of them has. And then the directors really haven't really done a whole lot since then either. They've directed a few small things, but mostly they've produced. So it's interesting that something this big didn't really propel everybody to mega stardom, and I think part of that is just because of the very nature of how this movie was marketed. And this and I want to get into this too, is the marketing on this movie was so well done that nobody has been able to figure out how to do it quite the same way since. It's kind of like just so well done that they're the only ones who've ever managed to accomplish this. What are your overall thoughts on the original Blair Witch Project?
Yeah, so when Blair Witch came out, I was pretty young. So I actually did not see this for the first time until 10 years later. I saw this.
Oh, wow.
I saw it for the first time in 2009. So you're talking, post marketing, post reveal of the, the reality of like this. There were plenty of people who knew this was just a film, but there were a lot of people that genuinely were not sure if it was or not. And I think were maybe worried that it wasn't. And, there was this kind of like push and pull of like, is it real? Is it not? And then, because, there's always been this argument of like, oh, well, it was a hoax. It's like, it's not really the definition of a hoax, right? Like, it's really just really smart filmmaking. So I saw this in 2009, knowing it wasn't real. At that time, I really didn't get into quite the same level of horror passion that I have now until I was much older. So, in 2009, I was a lot younger. How old was I in 2009? 19, 20, something like that. I was young. And I'm still young. But anyway, but I saw it and I was like, I remember watching it for the first time. I had just moved out from my parents' house. Just moved out on my own. And I was living at the time, I had a roommate, but we lived in like the middle of the woods. Um, and she was like at work one night, and I was like, "Oh my god, this looks like I've heard so much about this." Like, and I like horror movies. I grew up on like the cheesy ones. I was like, I can handle this. I'll watch it. Man, like I watched this by myself in the dark because that's how you're supposed to watch scary movies, and I was terrified. Like I was like, I am gonna have to drive to my parents' house. Like I was in the middle of the woods alone in a house that I had just moved into not that long ago, watching a movie about people who go into the woods and don't come out. And but I just remember being like it being one of the first films since I was a small child that legitimately scared me because it's so like I always tell people when I talk about the Blair Witch, nothing happens in this movie. So why is it so scary?
Yeah.
But it's scary. And I think it's just a testament to the things that they had to go through to pull this off as just it was
Yeah.
so effective. Um, and I think it's one of the reasons I have such a weird standard for when we're talking about any movies, even not just found footage, but horror in general, with this concept of showing too much and not showing enough, and this balance of how can you do either of those things but make your film effective. And the Blair Witch, I think, is the standard in my opinion for that because the events that happen are scary. The getting
Right.
lost, the everything around the arguing, the tension building, everything creates that overwhelming sense of like fear and like paranoia and all of these things while also like not really showing us anything at all. And it's just for it to have been as scary as it was on my first watch, and then thinking about how many times I've seen it now, how many times I've talked about it by this point, I'm still kind of blown away that it was able to scare anyone, just given how simple of a, like
Right.
it's a simple thing. Like anybody could go out into their yard and redo most of these scenes, but it wouldn't work. And it's just,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's mystifying. So, and obviously, I'm a huge found footage fan, which of course and I Blair Witch really was the thing that got me interested in that subgenre. And it kind of just really got me really more into horror too, because as an adult, I didn't really, or a young adult rather, teen adult, I didn't really push myself to go out and find horror. It wasn't until a little bit later in my life that I did that. But this movie's influential horror for me. So it's like one of my favorites. I'm completely
Right.
blown away with what they were able to do with it, considering the budget, the circumstances around all the things that happened while they were filming, and for it to still be like one of the most talked about indie films like ever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I agree. I actually did see this in 1999 when it came out. I didn't see it till it came out on video. Um,
Oh, okay.
but it was like immediately afterward.
Yeah.
Like as soon as it came out on video is when I saw it. Um,
Yeah.
but um, so this one, and I've been on your YouTube channel for five influential horror movies, and this
Yeah.
was one of mine.
Yep.
Um, and so this one hit me like pretty big time. Now,
Yeah.
I wasn't one of those ones who got duped into thinking it was real because they
Right.
very clearly in the marketing said, no, these people really aren't dead. This is just all fake. It's just a movie, but I
Right.
liked the way they did the marketing. And so the marketing really worked well in terms of, creating this kind of um question around whether or not this was a real movie and stuff. So I think
Yeah.
that it was super successful in that way. And for me, and I've mentioned this a lot on the show and elsewhere and everything, that horror wasn't really a big thing for me, but I had certain, like I watched it
Yeah.
um off and on throughout my life until I got really heavily into it a few years back.
Right.
But so I would watch things, especially the big mainstream stuff. So, of course, Blair Witch was like a phenomenon and everybody was talking about it at the time.
Right.
And I was caught up in all the marketing and everything, and I was really big into it. Um,
Yeah.
so much so that I was working at a hotel at the time. I was a part-time night auditor. So I only worked there 2 days a week doing night auditing, and the other night auditor was there like 5 days a week. And then I actually ended up getting a job as a as the security person, the like for another 4 nights a week there.
Okay.
So I was there 6 nights a week, and so then I was hanging out with the other night auditor, and we goofed around and stuff, and he was a big horror guy too. And so then we talked about, we're like, oh, you know what, like this, all this Blair Witch stuff started making us think about, oh, we could make our own horror movie. And so we came up with an idea, and we like roped a couple of the other hotel employees into it, and we got them all to like be in this stupid little short film that we made. It's really terrible. It's not great. Um, but we ended up, but it was a lot of fun just to do. And we didn't do it found footage style. It
Right.
probably would have been better found footage style, but we didn't think about that. Um,
Yeah. Found footage
but
style is a tricky filmmaking technique, though. I feel
it
like
is.
it's like it's so easy, in my opinion, to make a bad found footage film, and it's so much more complicated to make a really well done one because
Yeah.
of the way the camera stuff it's such a big part of the film being effective and making sense.
Yeah. 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 Whenever you hit that moment in the movie, like, why are you still holding the
Oh
camera?
my god, the question,
Um,
right? Yeah.
and which is great though, because in this movie they actually do it well, because there's a moment in midway through the movie where
Mm-hmm.
Josh is asking Heather, why are you still filming all of
Yeah.
this?
Yep.
And she doesn't know, she doesn't have an answer for him, she's just scared. And then he realizes it's because it creates a layer between you and reality.
Yeah.
And then that is like a purely like a super good reason for that, and why we continue to be able to see it. And then it, after that point, you just understanding, you're like, okay, I'm sold, I'm in. That makes sense to me. um
Yeah. And now any film that tries to use that reasoning since then has to prove it a little bit more, right? Because we're like, yeah,
right.
we already saw this. Like, because there's plenty of times in other found footage movies where they're like, I just need to talk to someone, or I just need to, like, which is essentially,
Yeah.
sort of the same thing. But because we're like in the original Blair Witch, we're talking about it, this
Right.
concept, and why are you doing it? And then it just makes it feel more genuine and makes it feel more realistic, whereas sometimes that element in other movies feels really forced, like, well, we know that y'all accepted this in Blair Witch, so we're just going to insert this as our reason because we don't have a better one, and that's a lot harder of a sell.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and I think that, like, I just, more often than not, I'm okay with taking a step back and just going, they have the cameras because it's necessary to continue making the
Because
film.
it's a movie.
um yeah, so I just take that step back, and I'm like, I don't even question it. I'm like, I get it, whatever, it's part of the movie. The only
Yeah.
time that I don't get it is when it's something like The Last Broadcast,
Oh.
um where it's like found footage all the way up into the end, and then it goes like completely out and makes no sense, and then it becomes just a
Mm-hmm.
movie, and I'm like, wait, what? That made
Oh,
no
I know.
sense.
And that's
So
when I feel like everybody idolized. Like, so many people talk about that when I was like, I was not a fan.
I
I
was
just
not a
think
fan either.
there's a lot of things about that doesn't work for me. But people like are like, you didn't like it seems like this big shocker when you tell people you're not fans. Like, but
Right.
I'm like, I'm a lot more lenient on the why are we holding the camera than like, so my co-host Tom from Found Footage Fridays, he is like
Right.
hard. He's like, no, I need a reason. Like, that's one of his things that will pull him out. But yeah, I'm kind of like you. I can kind of just go, well, it's a movie, right? So there has to be, that's the reason. So we're just going to kind of move on from that. But
Yeah. So just to put this out there, the last broadcast I reviewed back when I watched it, and I gave it 2 stars on Letterboxd, which is not good. And I said, this is by far the worst found footage I've seen so far.
I don't
Dull,
understand.
poorly
Yeah.
acted, and the switching from found footage style to traditional movie style in the last few minutes really took me out of
Fabulous.
it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the main thing. It's just like, it didn't like that, it just was
Yeah.
boring. And that, to me, that's the most unforgivable sin in a movie. Like, you can be a genuinely well-made movie, but if you're boring, that's the thing that'll take me out the most. And that's
Yeah,
what
the
that
whole
was. It
point
was
is to
just
be
boring.
entertaining. Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with that. Yeah, I
So
am a much hard. It's so hard for my attention to be kept, and a lot of times I
yeah.
end up forcing myself through movies to get to the halfway point where I finally do care. I'm like, okay, now I'm invested. But if something catches me like at the very beginning, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to end up loving it because my
Right.
attention is just so hard to keep at this point. I've seen so many movies, like
Oh yeah.
it's so hard to keep my attention.
but yeah, but Blair Witch just does a really good job. And like you said, it's really not there's really not a lot going on.
No.
Realistically, most of this is just the tension of the
Mm-hmm.
group.
Yeah.
They're lost. They can't figure out their way because the woods keep shifting on them.
Mm-hmm.
Keep making them go in a circle.
Yeah.
And they're being terrorized outside their tents every night.
Mm-hmm.
Something is making noise and shaking their tents and everything. And so they're scared. And that's what
Yeah.
brings up the tension. And but you don't see anything. You never see anything in this movie.
No.
And that's what's great about it is just that you can feel the tension through it all.
Mm-hmm.
Um and that's and the funny thing is it didn't I always find it funny that like I liked the movie, but I really didn't it didn't like click with me is like especially the end part where
Mm-hmm.
Josh is standing not Josh, Mike is standing in the
Like,
corner.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like for some reason I was like, okay, it's a good movie, but I wasn't like wowed by it. The funniest thing is that Cartoon Network, like a couple of months later, ended up
Yeah.
doing this thing called the Scooby-Doo Project.
Yes.
And they were doing this whole thing. It was like a weekend marathon of Scooby-Doo movie or Scooby-Doo episodes. And in
Yeah.
between the episodes, they would do this little like they they did so good with this. It's ridiculous. This
Mm-hmm.
needs to be put out at some point, like on Blu-ray or something. I would love this. But you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah, you can. I was
Um,
gonna say, yeah, you can watch one.
yeah. So but they basically had the Scooby Gang um running around the woods
Mm-hmm.
looking for a bad guy or whatever like that. And but at the end of it, it ends with Shaggy in the corner going, "I'm scared, man." Um, and it just cracked me up. But then like it just suddenly dawned on me the ending, and I was just like, "Oh my god!" And then like it sent chills down, gave me goosebumps, sent chills down my spine, and I was just like, "Oh my god!" It like everything finally connected with me. I don't know why it didn't. It just was weird, but I'm glad that something like that, did that. But that's just how big the fucking Blair Witch Project was at that
Yeah,
time.
talk about
Like,
influence,
you know,
right? Like,
we
yeah.
we talk about how influential it was, but people, if you didn't live during that time and you weren't around during that time, um,
Mm-hmm.
to be a part of that, you just don't understand how like how much this shifted everything in the culture, like in terms of like horror movies, and just everything. I mean, like I said, like Cartoon Network, a channel for kids,
I know.
did a parody of a horror movie.
Yeah.
Like it just was
Yeah.
like, what?
Well, and
Um,
when you're talking about like, so I did say like, I didn't see it until later, but I remember
yeah,
hearing conversations with my siblings and their friends, my parents talking about it. And then like
right.
like even the other major thing when we were like talking about like the marketing and stuff was, the Blair Witch utilized web and like online stuff before
Mm-hmm.
it got, obviously as big as it is now, but you're
Yeah.
talking about like a forum, a website with information and like these, and the way, like the level of depth that they went into outside of the filmmaking stuff
Oh
is
yeah.
wild, and it's so great, and it's so impactful, and it's changed the way, like, I mean, you talk about, a lot of horror movies go the very basic route when it comes to advertising, and they just do, trailers, and they post, pictures of their posters and whatever. But like, then you
Right.
think about movies like Smile, where they took people and put them in these
Yeah.
major places. And it's like, I know that that's obviously like a far jump from Blair Witch, but this is, I feel like the Blair Witch really created this outside the box marketing to
Yeah.
really push just how many different ways you can reach people to get them excited, to get them scared about what they're going to see when your film is released.
Yeah. No, they were at the forefront of web advertising, like
Yes.
internet advertising. They use the internet in a way nobody else had done.
Yep.
And nobody else since then has quite been able to
Yeah.
figure out how to do. And
Yeah.
I think part of that is because after that point, when people did try to do it, it wasn't as successful because it was like everybody already knew. You
It's already
know,
been done.
at that point, like everybody's like, okay, well, we know this is fake now. We know this is a movie, blah, blah, blah. Now, don't get me wrong, there have been successful things, like you mentioned, the Smile campaign and everything
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
That was pretty successful. I mean, that was
Oh
popping
my
up
God,
on
very
like what
successful.
was it? Like it was like Major League Baseball. There was a
Baseball
person in the
games and like
background,
really, yeah,
what? So,
yeah,
but going back to that, like it because it wasn't just the web. There was
right.
also a sci-fi channel documentary called Curse of the Blair
Curse of
Witch.
the Witch. Yep.
Um, and they also had a book that was called like the dossier or something like that that
Mm-hmm.
had like the police reports and everything that happened
Yeah.
surrounding the investigation after they found the tapes. Um,
Genius. Yeah.
and just like and I had that book too. I don't have it anymore, but I had that book. Between the book and the Curse of the Blair Witch documentary, it gives you so much background around the Blair Witch and about the
Yeah.
investigation stuff. It just adds like the mythology and world building that they
Oh my
did around
God.
this tiny ass movie
I know.
was just insane.
This
Um,
random found footage style film in the late 90s.
yeah, and this is what I'm talking about in terms of like, how they changed everything because it was a phenomenon. Like
Yeah.
it was beyond like crazy how good this movie was in terms of what it how
Yeah.
influential it was. But and I want to talk about the Curse of the Blair Witch real quick because
Yeah.
it was so interesting because it goes back into it shows you like quote unquote archival footage of
Yeah.
Rustin Parr
Yep.
talking and they go into the history of Ellie Kedward
Yep.
and Coffin Rock and all this stuff, and it's just so well done. It's so believable
Mm-hmm.
that like I can understand why people got caught up into it. In like, I got caught up
Yeah.
into it just as a fan, but I understood it was all fake. But if you didn't understand that it was fake, like
Yeah.
you would get blindsided by it. And I can understand why people were just like, oh my God, this is so real. What happened to these kids?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, and this doesn't happen to me often in found footage anymore because I'm kind of like numb to it. But there's been very few movies in general that are found footage style that I've watched and really questioned as far as whether they
Right,
were real or not. Because most of the time, like you're just going in to pretend that it's real, but you know that it's not. And this is
right.
one that like I remember watching it and then going into this, Blair Witch Project, rabbit hole because I was late to the game, and
Right.
then also being like, well, what if everybody's like wrong? Like, what if this really was, like
Right.
because to your point, they spent so much time and effort putting in these things that really were meant to make people go, okay, wow, like, or at
Yeah.
least to forget for a little while, that this was fake. And it is so crazy because like, so Eduardo Sanchez has like a guest spot. I don't know what else to call it in a film called Butterfly Kisses, which is
Okay.
the short of that is it's a filmmaker who found some tapes and is putting together these things, and it's a lore story based on this guy named Peeping Tom. But what's interesting about it is this guy is obsessed with being the next Blair Witch Project. So he gets on this radio show and they don't tell him, but Eduardo Sanchez comes on and just like is so mean to him, obviously on purpose, and it's just like,
Right.
this has already been done. You need to just be honest that it's not real. You're not going to be able to achieve this. And it was just, I remember like watching that and hearing him talk like that. And it's just so funny because how many times have I said similar things when I'm watching found footage, like to be able to really make people question or to completely forget that they know this isn't real. Like they really went all out for that.
So I would say the only thing that I've seen since Blair Witch that made me not really question, but sucked me in enough
Mm-hmm.
like that was Lake Mungo. Um
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
that one just is so like unnerving. And then just hits you at the end. That and I'm not gonna spoil it for anybody. I'm gonna let
Right.
people watch
Right.
that
Yeah.
one.
No, the
Lake
ending's a
Mungo
good
is
one.
just really
Yeah.
good. And Lake Mungo's not really found footage. I don't consider it found footage. I consider that mockumentary.
Mockumentary.
Um um
Yeah.
uh but it's definitely it's in that vein though. And but
Yes.
it's so disconcerting and it feels so real. the whole time, that you could get sucked into Lake Mungo very easily, just like with Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, and it being a
So
mockumentary style, you do forget that you're not watching something on like Dateline or I don't know, one of those like
yeah, yeah,
my
especially in this true crime like
yes,
series, like
the way
focus that
it's
everything's
done.
in these days. So
Yeah, my equivalent to that, that was one that I watched. Right, I remember texting my friend Tasha and being like, "We're sure this is fake, right?" Is the Poughkeepsie tapes,
see,
which
and
is
I didn't get into that one.
oh my god, the Poughkeepsie tapes is such a rough watch. I don't even know that you can call it good or entertaining, right? Because it's heavy. But there was just these things because I've watched a lot of documentaries about serial killers and a lot of those cold cases. Like I've watched stuff like that my whole life growing up. We are
Right.
fascinated with that stuff. Like, and so I'm watching it going like I can see this being real. Like I struggled with it and I got like a few things in and I was like, I was texting Tasha the whole time I was watching it because we watched it for found footage month a couple of years ago. And I was like, I'm telling you, like, we're sure this is real. Like, it had me so uncomfortable to the level that I felt like I was watching and like something that was real. It was so uncomfortable for me. So that's my like only other one that I've ever
Yeah.
watched and been kind of like, ugh, not quite in the same way that Blair Witch made people feel, but just in this
Right.
second guessing. Well, I don't know. Like, are we sure we've seen these people alive since this was done? Like, do we know that this woman is okay? Like, I don't know. But anyway, so that would be like my
Right. Well, and this was I had to look back because I did watch that one. And I did give it 3 stars. And I said it that it was good, that it was interesting and kept me engaged. And
opinion.
that if I hadn't known it was a movie and I had gotten sucked into it, I would have been more disturbed by it. So
Sure.
so yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that. But yeah,
Yeah.
because I knew it was a movie, I
Yeah. Sure.
I didn't get as sucked into it. But yeah, with this one, this one's interesting too. So Blair Witch Project is interesting because part of the believability in that is that they did no, like the stars did no press for it at all because they wanted to keep
Mm,
the
yep.
the um the illusion that they
Hmm.
were actually dead, that it was a real thing.
Yep.
um and so none of the actors did any press for it. And eventually they did, after it came out.
Right.
That's when they did kind of a media tour kind of thing, and they went
Right.
on all the talk shows and stuff.
Yeah.
And then after that they each had some work. Now Joshua Leonard's the only one who's gone on to some success.
Hmm.
He's a regular actor. He does a lot of work, especially in television.
Hmm.
And he's actually married to Allison Pill, who's an actress, and they have a kid and everything. So he's acquired a modicum of success at this point, which was cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But both Mike and Heather have both been they've kind of been rocky with their work, and Heather herself has actually fully stopped acting as of 2008.
Yeah.
She kept getting typecast, and she's
Yeah.
even changed her name at this point, because she just does not she's so associated, everybody just so associates her with the Blair Witch Project, that she
Hmm.
just got tired of it, and she changed her name, and now she works as a pot farmer. um
That's isn't that
uh,
also why she like stopped doing like she like I know she's going to be or was at something recently or is going to be at something soon, but it's like the first time she's come to like
oh
a con or something because like I think she kind of just like completely wanted to dissociate from
yeah,
that whole scene of like because when people like you said when people see her that's who she is she's Heather from the Blair Witch Project so yeah
yeah,
it definitely seemed to have had a pretty heavy impact on her life.
yeah. I hadn't heard anything about her coming back, and if she does, that's cool. Like, I think
Oh
that she could, like, if as long as she's okay with that and it's on her own terms, like,
yeah.
I think that'd be great for her, because there's a whole bunch of fans. Like, if she retired in 2008 and changed her name a little bit after that, then
Yeah.
she's been very far removed from it. And there's a whole new generation of fans who are coming up, and who
People
would
who are
probably love
just
to,
discovering this movie. Like,
yeah. And so, it's I think that'd be cool for her, make some money off of it, so
yeah.
do it once in a while, and then go back and live live back, quietly when you can, you know, get that money. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I wish I was trying to see if I could find it really quick. I had messaged a friend of mine because I had seen her picture. It's actually
oh,
all
okay.
three of them, I think. I'll have to go back and find it. I
Oh,
know
that'd
I
be cool.
saw where the three of them were going to go to something, and wherever it is, it was too far for me to be able to go, and I was really upset. But I think it's
Yeah,
maybe something in 2024. I don't think it's something this year, but I'll have to go back and look and
right.
find it and send you the post because
Yeah,
I'm pretty
yeah,
sure I did see something about where she had finally agreed to come do something, but it's really difficult, at least my understanding, to get her to do anything because of kind of like you said
yeah,
earlier, you said it perfectly. It created this weird subculture. And so it's got
yeah,
this very intricate fandom. And so I think she just kind of distanced herself from all of that and just wanted to,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But anyway.
yeah. But yeah. So, the last thing I have to talk about, this movie specifically is I found there's a fan theory about this movie that, you know, the Blair Witch stuff doesn't exist at all, you know, of course, you know, but in the course of this movie, that
Mm.
that really what happened was is that Josh and Mike killed Heather in
Oh,
it,
I've heard this. Yes.
which I think is an interesting theory because Mike vanishes. You don't see him. All they find is like, you know, his teeth pulled from his mouth or whatever like that, and then Mike's in the corner, and then something attacks Heather, which could be Josh, you know, and
Yep.
so I was just like, you know, that's a solid theory. That's an interesting theory to go behind that, you know, and make it more grounded and not something so, you know, supernatural, especially because you don't see anything, you know, so it's plausible that they could have done something like that, you know, but I'm going to believe in the Blair Witch
Yeah.
because that's more fun. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a, you know, I just thought that was an interesting theory that people had come up with since then.
To make it more
But
about people versus some like supernatural
yeah,
entity. Yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
honestly,
and
that's almost scarier, you know.
it really is, you know, and so, you know, it's kind of cool. Like I like that. I like that theory. I myself want to hold to, you know, the Blair Witchness of it all.
Yeah, me too.
But
Yeah.
but you know, but did you have anything else you wanted to say about this one in particular that we didn't talk about yet
No, I think that's
before we
probably
move
it.
on?
That's good.
Yeah. Well, we're now moving on to one of mine that I actually like, but you do not. Now it had been a long time since I'd seen Book of Shadows, um, but I had remembered enjoying it, because I like the aspect of what's interesting about this one is this doesn't go the typical route that something like Blair Witch 2016 goes and just continues into another group of people goes into the, you know, the woods outside of Burkittsville and, you know, gets caught up in the whole Blair Witch aspect of it. This
Yeah.
one, the interesting thing about this movie is it takes a it puts it into traditional movie. It makes it into a traditional movie,
Yep.
and although it kind of blurs the line because there's moments where it's found footage, but
Footage
also
based.
just
Yeah.
a straight up movie, which is in itself is very interesting. Um, but this movie says, well, there is a movie about Blair Witch, the Blair Witch Project, and
Yeah.
these are a bunch of fans who are now going into the woods to, you know, go celebrate this. And this is what happened. There were a lot of people after the the Blair Witch Project who went down to Burkittsville, Maryland,
Oh yeah.
and invaded those woods and
Yeah.
like pissed off of the locals and
Mm-hmm.
trashed everything and just were generally nuisances. And
Mm-hmm.
this movie kind of, you know, did that same thing. And I thought that was an interesting tack to take, especially because the director of this, oh man, is Joe Berlinger, who is known predominantly for making documentaries. That's literally all he does is he makes a bunch of different documentaries. At the
Oh, I
time
didn't know that.
he
Hmm.
had made a couple on the West Memphis Three, the kids who were accused of killing some other kids down in Tennessee. And
Yeah, I remember
so
that story. Yeah.
yeah, so he made those documentaries that helped get their story out to everybody. Um, and so it was interesting for him. His very first movie is this more. movie take on a documentary style format. Like,
That is
so it was
interesting.
just,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and it didn't do well. It really derailed any chance of him doing film for a long time. I don't think he did another film until like something like 20 years later.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then the film he did was kind of a variation on what he was already doing. He was doing he's the director and producer on the tapes series of things on Netflix. So he was the one who did the Ted Bundy tapes.
Oh
Um,
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know that. Okay, okay. Huh.
yeah, and then so his neck, and so then he did the movie that shockingly vile, shockingly twisted or vile, and whatever. I'm not sure what
Yep.
it is, but
Yeah. It's
basically
got like
the
six
Zach,
words in it. Yep. Hmm.
yeah, so the
Yep.
Zac Efron Ted Bundy
Yep.
movie. So
Yeah.
he directed that
Okay.
as well. So
I didn't know that. That's cool.
but
Okay.
yeah, no, he's very well known for doing a lot of documentary work on like serial killers and stuff. So so it was interesting to have him be the director on this movie, and not really doing it in a documentary style, which I think
Yeah.
would have lent itself a lot more to it.
Yeah.
So I there's aspects of this movie that I really enjoy a lot, but the studio interfered a lot with what he wanted to do, and I
Oh,
think
of course
that's
they
what kind of
do.
derails a lot of, and maybe why you don't enjoy it as much, but we'll have to find out exactly why you don't enjoy it. So, but
uh,
so yeah, tell us.
yeah, it's hard because the first time I ever saw this, I went in as a massive Blair Witch fan, which I think was is a mistake for multiple reasons. I think the film style change rather is obviously hard to not have an opinion on. I think,
Yeah,
at least for me, and so what I can say, given because I rewatched it recently to get ready to talk about it because I had only seen it the one time and it had been so long, and I wanted to make sure I had like a newer memory of like what we were going to be talking about. And I think I was messaging you like while I was watching about how like I was so unwatchable for me, like I really, and I thought about it, and I think one of the biggest things that I can say about it as far as the reason I think it's so hard for me to enjoy is because of how unlike Blair Witch it feels. And so it's one of those
right.
things where like I feel like, and I feel this way about so many film series, or I mean franchises. Like, so I feel like if you took this film and you completely removed the Blair Witch connection and you made it, I don't know, about something else, it's the same film but around a different lore, not connected to the original film. I think I would have found it to just be a fun early 2000s horror movie, just
Yeah,
like the other, like the more slashery type stuff that came out around that time, because that's what this reminds me of. This reminds me of like
right.
urban legend, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like it feels very early 2000s slasher, even though that's not what it is, and that made it hard for me, I think. And
Right.
I think that it genuinely, if this was made about anything else, I would have had a completely different feeling because I like what I think it's trying to say. I feel like there's some commentary in this that makes it, something to pay attention to because it's got some interesting things about like, like and I know you're probably not surprised by this. I don't remember any of the characters' names. I've only seen this movie one and a half times, and the first time was like over a decade ago, more than this, a long time
Right.
ago. So, but there's these things where they go into the town, kind of touching back on what you were just talking about what the Blair Witch did for Burkittsville. You've got
Right.
these people that go into the town and they're so clearly unwanted there. And so
Right.
there's these moments like that, like when they go to the store or just things like this as they're going through, as we're moving through the story of the film, where it's very it's kind of touch and go on like what the Blair Witch was and what it did. And I think like that's pretty smart as far as the filmmaking side of it goes. But I think the overindulgence of like the like the more like I guess like witchcraft stuff and like we've got our character that's like I think is she a Wiccan, I think, or
Yeah.
is she just okay, I can't remember. And so like her character is like if it weren't related to Blair Witch, I could have bought into that. But this just felt so different for it to have been related to it. And it just causes huge disconnect. And I genuinely like I think early 2000s films like this have like a place in the timeline of horror and things that they were trying to accomplish at that time, and I'm not mad about that. But I don't
Right.
typically like them. I don't, I mean, I think the Scream sequels being like very like one of very few exceptions to that rule, but like some of the ones that came after that I just named, like they're fine, they're fun, but I'm not super big fans, and that's kind of how I feel about this. I just get so wrapped up in feeling how I feel about the Blair Witch that when I go into this, I can't turn that off. And I don't, I know that's like such a weak point as like a viewer, but like it was really hard for me because it was supposed to be connected. It wasn't filmed the same. The lore was handled a lot differently, I felt like, and just I felt like a lot of what they were trying to do got lost in the oversaturation of making it connected to the Blair Witch, if that makes sense.
Right. So, yeah, no, and I totally understand that. And I can see the aspect, like you're saying, that if you took it out of the Blair Witch universe, that it could be a more enjoyable movie.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I can see that too. Like I think that if you took it outside of the Blair Witch Project universe, it would definitely make it different. And possibly more enjoyable for a lot of people. This movie did not do well. This movie did not connect with most people because of that very reason, because
Yeah.
most people were so associated, the found footage genre, and this was not that. That it takes it out of it. It's I think what they're doing, I appreciate it because they didn't go that route, that they were trying to talk about the fandom in a
Yes.
way that was
Yeah.
interesting, and it was a different point of view, because if you had tried to do something in the found footage and tried to basically recreate it, I think it would have failed just as much, if not more so, than this movie did, and would have been even worse talked about, because Artisan, the studio that was that owned the Blair Witch rights and stuff like that, they wanted to fast track a sequel, so they were going to make
Yeah.
whatever they were going to make.
Yep.
um and what ended up happening was, they were actually unhappy with Joe Berlinger's version of the movie that he turned in, and they actually recut it to make it more commercial, more of a traditional horror movie. And so I would love to see like his version of that and see what
Huh.
he actually had intended, because apparently it was supposed to be more ambiguous about
Not
what was
so.
going
Oh,
on,
okay.
to
Yeah.
not so like
In your face, kind
traditionally
of.
kind of
Yeah.
linear, even though this had like moments where it's like, kind of confusing.
Sure.
I think that it would have been more interesting to leave it more ambiguous like that. So,
Yeah.
um, and I think that could have been more successful and maybe more talked about. I mean, this movie, it's interesting. This movie was put out on DVD and has never been put out on Blu-ray. Um,
Oh well.
so
Didn't know
I
that.
I thankfully was able to buy it digitally, and so I got it through Voodoo. Um,
Oh, okay.
so but yeah, I like the movie mostly just because it tries to do something different, that it tried
Sure.
to not stick to that same formula that had already happened. And that they did try to make it more of a commentary on, on the fandom behind the
Right.
Blair Witch, because so many people believed in it and people were going down there, like we said, that it was an interesting take on it that wasn't successful because of the differing voices between the studio and the director. And
Yeah.
so, for me, it's still entertaining. But I can
Yeah.
see where for most people it's not, especially if you want to connect it so fully, and they're trying harder to put some more supernatural stuff on this than even the first movie did, whereas the
Yes.
first movie is still very ambiguous. Is there something going on, or is it really just
Yeah.
Josh and Mike messing with her? What
Mm-hmm.
is going on?
Yep.
Whereas this one's a little bit more straight up. There is definitely something supernatural or something going on, that
Mm-hmm.
by the end of it, did they kill, like, was something influencing them, or were they just
Or
insane and killing people?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's so it's so I get it. I get that it's not a movie that's going to be enjoyable for most people. I
Oh,
still enjoy it, even after this time. Maybe not as much as I probably did back when it first came out, but I still think it's a fun movie. And like you said, if you can remove yourself from it a little bit and just go, okay, well, maybe
yeah.
don't keep it fully connected to the Blair Witch, then you can enjoy it a little bit more. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen some, and this happens, I feel like with franchise, like sequels or the third ones, like I feel like, there used to be this really taboo thing about, The Exorcist 3 and then, the Season of the Witch and like Book of Shadows. But I
yeah,
feel like in the last, 5 years or so, people have come around to appreciate films like that differently than they did when they first came out or when they first watched
right.
them. And so, you're seeing more people come out and they're like, oh, The Exorcist 3 is my favorite, and oh, Season of the Witch is my
Yeah.
favorite, like, which is, that's me. I love the Season of the Witch. But with
Oh yeah,
the Book
that's
of
my favorite one.
Shadows, yeah, same. And the Book of Shadows is one that I feel like in the last, I don't know,
Yeah,
year or
I've heard a lot
so,
of people talking more and more about it and saying that they
yeah,
like it.
I don't
Yeah.
know where these things come from. Like they seem so out of the blue, but it is something that I am seeing more people coming around to revisiting and talking about. They have a lot of love for it, and it's considered a hot
Yeah.
take because I think we
Yeah.
covered how the Blair Witch was and what it did for people and how people love it and blah blah blah. So it's kind of a taboo thing to be like, oh, like I love the Book of Shadows, because there's so many people that are going to be like, no, 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 like, but
I don't
I,
think
it's
I don't think that anybody's going to put Book of Shadows above the first Blair Witch, and if they do, that's a little weird. But
sure,
I definitely can see the critical reappraisal of it, and people
yeah,
coming back to it and going, and like you said, you may not still enjoy it that much, but you can appreciate what it's trying to
oh yeah,
say, and maybe eventually at some point you'll come back around on it and go, you know what, this is actually pretty, and again, not pretty good, but more of a, this is interesting and it's not as bad as I thought it was.
yeah, really coming back and being like, I can like this for what it is without trying to make it something it wasn't trying to be.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree.
And I like that. I think that that's, I think that when we can go back and we can look at movies, and especially movies that we thought were just kind of that you can
Mm-hmm.
come back and go, especially ones that were reviled or the ones that did things in a different way, that kind of took everybody out of it. Like you said, like,
Yeah,
Exorcist 3 or Season of the Witch,
yeah,
that, you come back to it and go, you know what? They may not be part of the main storyline, or they may not be part of it, but they're trying to tell us something different. They're trying to, you know,
yeah.
to do something different and make it interesting in a way that, while not connected to the overall narrative, is interesting on its own. So
Yeah,
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 no, that's very
I
cool.
totally agree. Yeah.
Um, well, let's go ahead and move on to 2016's Blair Witch, which was directed by Adam Wingard.
Mhm.
And so this one, I like this one, but at the same time, I feel like it's retreading a lot of the same ground as the first one, which makes it not super interesting. Um, it's okay. I like the better camera work,
Mhm.
because they're doing a lot of trickery, with this, giving you from the people's perspective. They've got these little like ear cameras, uh,
Mhm.
which is nice, but it also makes it so that when they're looking around, you could just use they can just use regular traditional cameras to make
Yeah.
those scenes work for them. Um, but I like that. I like that kind of camera trickery. That makes sense to me in terms of that, and that way you're doing a found footage without having to realistically like just put cameras in everybody's hands. Um,
Sure.
and it takes it out of the immediacy of something like the original Blair Witch Project, but gives you a way of being able to see things, better in a way. It makes it more, not necessarily cinematic, but it gives it
Mhm.
better camera work, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so, but what are your overall feelings on this?
I actually really liked this one. I think it's weird because you're right. It definitely doesn't tread any new ground. But I think the things
Yeah.
that I like about it are, I think I like the change up in the technology. So one of my favorite things, because there's a million found footage movies. I One of the
Right.
things that I really like is when I watch a found footage that is kind of adjusting itself to the times, adding the newer
Yes.
technology,
Yes.
coming into a newer time frame, and having, because for me, with things like ear cameras and things like something that you're wearing versus carrying, it's
Yeah.
almost forgivable about our question of why are we
Yeah.
still
Why
filming?
is the camera still on?
Because
Yeah.
if you're not holding something that is keeping you from running away or defending yourself, you're going to kind of forget that it's there when you're scared and you keep moving. So I think it kind of adds this level of validity to that, as far as like still being able to see stuff. So those are some things that like I really like when I see them in any found footage movie. So because I don't get me
Same.
wrong, I went into this with very low expectations. Like
Yeah.
I was super nervous about going to like seeing this movie, when it first came out, and I ended up being pretty pleasantly surprised. I remember kind of rolling my eyes, when it was like, oh, like it's going to be connected and it's going to be, they're going to go look for Heather and all these things. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't, I don't know. I guess that's sure. Why not? But it was one of those things that I kind of struggled with. But then I also really liked some of these nods to scenes that happen in the original Blair Witch. So, like, in the
Right.
original, we've got the hands on the outside of the tent. In this one, we have the tent just being like yanked up into the abyss. I don't know. And so there's like these shots that are similar but not the same. And I kind of
Right.
liked that. It was still giving us that like Blair Witch, like when you see, like for me at least, going into a knowingly continuation of the Blair Witch film, it's like you see the tent, you're like, oh, like something is going to happen with the tent. Like there's a lot of focus on it, and then when things happen, or I just thought like those little things, and there's a couple things in the house that are similar to that too. There's just these moments that you're like, I kind of remember these scenes. Like I remember them, and then now they're being done in a different way, but it's still kind of
Right.
a nod. I really like, I feel like one of the things you talked about earlier was you don't really see a lot of stuff. Nothing like really happens to them that we see on camera. And so, like, as far as physically, like, we don't
Until the
see
end.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't see them get dragged away or hung up in a tree, or we don't see anything
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, you do get shots of people getting hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these some of those scenes were real, I thought, really well done. Again, very low expectations going into this. I was really impressed with kind of the body horror stuff that they did, which isn't,
Yeah.
it's not extreme, it's not over the top, but it was effective for me. Um,
Yeah.
and this time around we get a lot more time in the house, and we
Yeah.
get a little bit more, I don't want to call it lore because it feels like it's kind of just this like add-on thing, but they kind of add a couple things to the way that you have to handle the Blair Witch. And so I kind of thought some of that stuff was cool, but I actually really liked this one. I don't think, obviously the first is best, but I think this was a pretty good continuation considering how long between that one, and then so you got the timeline between that one, Book of Shadows, and then this one. I remember watching it and being like, I really did not think I was going to like this as much as I did, but I ended up really liking it.
Yeah, I thought that, like I said, I didn't think this one was bad at all.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I think what ends up happening is because it's so similar to the original, I view this as more of a kind of a requel.
I
That
gotcha.
it's kind of retelling the story again. So
Yeah.
you are getting a lot of those same, it's like a bigger budget retelling.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good point.
and so you're getting a lot of similar scenes, a lot of similar situations with, you know, with some different twists in it, which is, like you said, you get the body horror the moments like with the one girl who just like starts
Yeah.
breaking.
Oh, yeah.
And
The
yeah.
sound. Ooh.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, that
Good.
was horrible. Yeah, no, there's some great moments in this,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it's like, so I don't put this one nearly as high for Blair Witch because it's kind of just retelling the story. And like for
Sure.
anybody who doesn't know, the main character is the brother of Heather,
Yeah.
from the first one. and he gets a tape sent to him with footage from inside the house, and it looks like it's her.
Yep.
Um, briefly, you come to find out later on that it's not her.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting time trickery going on. They very
Yeah.
much expand on ideas that were in the original movie, and
Mhm.
that's why I find it more as a requel
Yeah.
than a direct sequel in a lot of ways, because it's really taking the some of the moments and some of the ideas from the first one and kind of expanding on those ideas and making them interesting, um and which is cool. I do think
Yeah.
that it's a good movie. It's not bad in any way, but it just, was it completely necessary? Not really.
No,
And it's
not
not
at
one I'm
all.
gonna, yeah, and it's not one I'm gonna go back to that often. I do like
Sure.
Adam Wingard. I think he's made some great movies.
I like him too.
Uh
Yeah.
The Guest is awesome.
Hmm.
Um uh what's the other one? You're Next.
You're next. Hmm.
And I like what he's been doing in the Godzilla, in the MonsterVerse. So
Yeah. You're next
so
is
far,
a favorite of mine, so definitely.
yeah, I like The Guest more than You're Next, but yeah, that's just me. But I do like the. I every time I watch You're Next, I gain more and more appreciation for it. So I
Yeah.
do like it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, this is a good movie. I don't think it's bad in any way. But
Sure.
like I said, I don't think it was necessarily necessary. Um, that
Sure.
if we didn't have it, it would have been fine. But like I said, I do like that. I agree with you about it. Whenever we get newer technology and stuff like
Yeah.
that, it makes it more interesting in a lot of ways to see how they're going to use it. Like I said, the wearable cameras like GoPros and stuff like that make
Yeah.
it
I love
a
it.
lot better in terms of keeping you into it rather than going, why do you still have the camera on?
Yeah.
So
I agree.
I like that aspect of it. Um, but there's a recent movie that came out not too long ago on Shutter called Deadstream. I
Yeah.
just actually recently got the Blu-ray for it because I like the movie. I know you're a little bit softer on it. Um,
Yeah.
but but I like what they did in that because it was like a live stream thing, and they actually did some nice little trickery there where, like, because usually in these found footage movies you don't get any music for it, and that kind of is a
And he
weird.
had it.
And
Yeah.
he was actually like soundtracking his stuff,
He
and it
hit the
made it
music.
so
Yeah.
funny. It made it so fun for me in that way because like
Yeah.
he's actually like soundtracking it and doing,
Yes.
and he had all these multiple cameras up, so it was like it made it better in so many ways for like found footage type stuff, because then you had the excuses of these cameras in these other locations and stuff, so it made it make more sense in a lot of ways that
Yeah.
a lot of these other movies don't think about. So that that and it's harder to do like in something like the Blair Witch movies where you have to be holding cameras the whole time. So
Yeah,
but
yeah. I think it's super smart to do the wearable stuff just because, or like you said,
yeah,
we having them up in multiple places, and because there's so many different types of like sub genres of found footage, but like
right,
a lot of them are let's go into a haunted place. So when you set
yeah,
up the cameras in other places, like
yeah,
Ganjian
something
does
like
that
Grave
really well.
Encounters. Yeah,
It's engraved encounters. You've got them all over the place. So you get to see a little bit more as a viewer. You're not super limited. You're not putting all the strain on what can be seen right in front of someone, which I think
right,
also helps with things like effects and keeping that visibility low, but still enough to keep people engaged. So I think it's just a
yeah,
really
exactly.
smart move to utilize that stuff. And I think when you're doing the newer stuff, you're not having people go, nobody uses that anymore. Like, where
Yeah,
did you even get one of those? That kind of thing. Where
yeah,
you could be like, oh, I can go on Amazon and get 10 of these for $200 and put them all over my house. It's way
right.
more relatable and realistic in that way.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
something like, the Paranormal Activity movies where they've just got their
Yeah.
cameras set up, and that makes a lot of sense, so
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
It's a it's I think found footage is interesting. You're obviously a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
I think that, and arguably I would say that Blair Witch is the thing that and I don't think anybody disagrees. I think Blair Witch is the movie that brought it to the mainstream and spawned like the industry that it's become since then.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
definitely, I'm still waiting, like dipping my toes into it now and again. I haven't watched nearly as much as you have, but
Yeah.
it's been a little while since I've actually watched some too. I need to get back onto my list of them that I set myself a while ago, because there was a good documentary about found footage
Hmm.
movies called the found footage phenomenon that was
Phenomenon.
on
Yeah.
Shutter.
Yeah.
And so that was really good and made me want to watch a bunch of these
Yeah, and
that have
if
come
you're
out.
not super, if you're not super, I guess, versed, I don't know what else to call it. Like if you haven't seen a ton of found footage movies, and then you watch that documentary, you're gonna walk
Yeah.
away with at least 50 to watch. Like they reference so many, and so many of the
Oh
ones that they
yeah.
reference are good, like really good
Are the
ones.
good ones, yeah.
Yeah, and they just
Or
kind
at
of
least
walk
the
through.
influential ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and they walk through like why they're the ones that they're talking about specifically and what
Right.
they kind of go. I always say like Blair Witch started it, and then I think Paranormal Activity kind of renewed it. And then
Yeah.
I guess at least for me personally, I think the next big one after that that I think really affected people's interest in found footage was Deadstream. So even though I'm not like a super big fan, which is
Yeah.
mostly, I'm sure you know this because it's a comedy and you know how I feel about those,
Yeah.
but what is true, it brought a lot of attention to found
Yeah.
footage, and I will never complain about that because I want people to see more found footage. I want more people talking about found footage. So I think it's interesting. We go in these waves and we have these things that kind of bring us back and amplify, and we get new creators and new people interested in the subgenre, and I love
Yeah. Well, since I have you here, why don't you tell me, maybe five found footage movies that you think are that people should check out that maybe they haven't checked out.
Yeah, so some of these are a little bit more popular probably than others. And then, my number one that I always tell people that nobody ever talks about is The Monster Project. Um, it's usually streaming somewhere for free, but it's monster found footage. It's all practical effects. It's content creating. It feels spills so many buckets for me. I always recommend The Monster Project. Afflicted is another one.
Afflicted,
That
yeah,
one,
Afflicted. I've seen that one. That one's good.
yeah, that one's great. I won't say what that one's about because it'll ruin it. But that one's got like travel and
Yeah,
these best friends, and it's really good.
and good camera work too.
Amazing camera work, and I will say this: the first half of the film is kind of like, well, okay, maybe not the first half. There's parts of it that are really fun and like energetic, and then it like
Yeah.
shifts gears. It's so well done. Another one that I would add to my list now because I just saw this one and we actually just covered it on my channel because I had never heard of it. It came out in like 2018. Is Live Scream, which is about a
Okay.
horror let's player. Um, and if you are a fan of horror games on any level, even if you don't like found footage or whatever style you would want to call this, like there is you will this is a very nostalgic and fun film for horror game lovers. So that's Live Scream. Another one that I usually tell people to watch that I don't feel like, a lot of people talk, and I know like some people really aren't gonna love this, and that's okay. But I loved it. It was a lot of fun. Is the Dinosaur Project. And I just said the Monster Project, but the Dinosaur Project was it's very CGI, but it doesn't matter. It is a fun found footage movie about dinosaurs. I absolutely loved that one. And then another one, I kind of actually talked about this one a little bit earlier. Thankfully seems to be getting some traction now that it's been out for a while, is Butterfly Kisses. If
Hmm.
you like the Blair Witch, if you like things, kind of revolving around lore, I think that that Butterfly Kisses is one of the best ones that you can go to. I am absolutely wild about that movie. We got to talk to the concept artist for that. We interviewed him for Found Footage Fridays, and just learning a lot about that film and its influences and just seeing how it all came together. It is fantastic. So those would be like my five recommendations.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. I think I've only seen, I think I might have seen the Monster Project, but I could be wrong.
Oh, so
Actually, I
good.
don't think I saw that one. I think I saw hashtag Screamers, which was from the same people, not the same makers, but from Dread Presents. Um,
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that one. Is that found footage?
um, yeah, because they're talking to people like they're going to go talk to people about like a creepy
Hmm.
video that they put up on online and stuff.
I
So
believe that does sound familiar. Maybe I have seen
yeah,
that. I struggle remembering all this stuff. I have seen this. I didn't mean to yell at you. I'm
okay,
sorry. I have seen this. Came out in 2016.
yeah,
Oh, yes, 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 yes. About that weird. Okay, yes, I have seen that.
yeah.
I've seen that.
So that's the one I'd seen. It came on a double pack with Monster Project. I don't have the Blu-ray anymore, but I hadn't watched Monster Project yet, so
Oh,
that's
you'll have to
interesting. I
let me
think the
know
only
what you
one I saw
think.
was Afflicted. So, but that one's really good. Um,
Yeah,
but
you'll have
yeah,
to let me
no,
know
it's
what you
a
think of Monster Project because I love that one.
yeah, yeah. Don't think it's on my list. There's a few more on my list. That
The
doesn't mean anything.
ever-growing
It's
list.
just yeah, yeah, always. Um, let's see, because after I watched the found footage phenomenon
Hmm.
movie, I added a bunch that were on there, and then plus I asked people like what were the
Yeah.
best ones, the things that people suggested.
Hmm.
And so I've seen the Poughkeepsie tapes, Chronicle, which I had seen before, and I like Chronicle. I know
Chronicle's
you're
good.
yeah. I know like you don't really consider it very horror, but which it's kind of not.
It's like,
It's more
yeah, I mean,
superhero.
only in like the sense that people can be scary, like
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's really, and it's got a sci-fi element a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Apartment 143,
that's a good
which I
one.
thought was pretty good. Afflicted was pretty good.
Mhm.
Wreck,
Oh yeah, that's
which was
iconic
which
found footage.
yeah. Yeah, and it was all right. I wasn't super wowed by it, but it was all right. The Last Exorcism I thought was pretty good.
I liked that one too. Yep.
The Last Broadcast is not great.
Nope.
Um, Unfriended,
Oh, I liked that
I
one.
thought I thought that was pretty good. Hell House LLC was really good.
That's
That's probably the
iconic.
best.
Everybody's
That's the
yeah.
best one I've seen so far, I think.
What?
Um,
Better than Afflicted?
well, just barely, but I think Afflicted is really good. And let's see, Grave Encounters I thought was just okay. Um,
Well,
it's
oh
it's
no.
I know you and other people really love Grave Encounters. I think it's fine, but let me see. Let me look at my review of it because I was
Well,
just like,
if you do kind of like at least this, have you seen Gonjiam Haunted Asylum?
I have not.
So if you at least like the concept, what I can say, and then people can come for me if they want to, I think Gonjiam takes the premise of Grave Encounters and makes it better. So if you just found Grave Encounters to be kind of okay, you may actually
Yeah.
like Gonjiam more,
Okay.
perhaps. Ooh,
All right. I'll
yeah,
have to add that to my list. And then I liked
Leroy,
Norroy the Curse.
that's a good one.
Um, yeah, that one was pretty good. But I've got a bunch still on my list.
Oh
I've
yeah,
got
there's tons.
Ghost Watch, The Mirror, Butterfly Kisses, which you mentioned, Willow Creek, Capture, Kill, Release,
Mm-hmm.
Be My Cat,
Ugh,
The
that one
Borderlands.
I've heard crazy things about that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The Borderlands, Death of a Vlogger, One
really
Cut of the
interesting.
Dead, Jerusalem, um, Found Footage 3D, The McPherson
Oh,
Tape, and The Conspiracy.
oh my God! When you get to the McPherson date, you
Okay, so I think I've watched part of that already, and and I think the reason why I haven't finished that is because I'm already like fully taken out of it. Um,
have
I like, and that's why like I'd have to look at it, but I think I've only watched like half of it,
oh, it's
and
so
I haven't gone back to it just because that first half is just so boring.
it gets worse. It gets so much worse.
Yeah,
And it's funny, just like for like reference, it was a very thrown together project that the guy who actually made it didn't intend for it to be anything like for real, and then it ended
right.
up being like a real, like they ended up releasing it as like a real movie, but it was never intended. It was like a project he did in school, and they just had to
Yeah.
like throw something together. And listening to him talk about it, it was just like, oh my, actually that might have been on the found footage phenomenon thing.
Oh,
I can't
okay.
remember.
Yeah, yeah. I think it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yes, it's
Um.
awful.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, getting back to Blair Witch, I all of these I think are entertaining. I think that, they're not boring at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so, but definitely, if for some reason you haven't seen the original Blair Witch Project, definitely seek that out, because I think that's always well worth a watch. The others, if you like the universe and stuff like that, sure, go check them out. They don't really give much to the expansion of the universe, but they're just kind of fun playing around in it. More than anything.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the bulk of the mythology and the of what you get from the original Blair Witch, if you go and watch also The Curse of Blair Witch, and you maybe seek out the case file or case book or whatever it's called, the dossier.
Yeah.
I think that would help make it more fun. And apparently there's a newish Blair Witch game out there for PC console. I'm not sure if it's on console, but I know it's on PC. That's supposed to be really good.
Yeah. It looks good. I think it missed the mark on a few things, but I'll be honest, that's pretty common with the Bloober team. Everything they do looks stunning and sounds awesome in concept, and then the gameplay, you get to the end, you're like, why? But anyway, it is a beautiful game though, and it does have some kind of scary moments. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I have to say about all of this. Do you have anything else you want to mention?
No. Watch more found footage. That's all.
All right. Well, why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
So YouTube channel is just Voices from the Mausoleum. My Twitter is From Mausoleum. I think Instagram is Voices FTM, and Facebook and TikTok are the same, Voices FTM. Honestly, if you search, you'll probably find something. But I'm on everything. So I do mostly YouTube content. I try to do longer content, so that's where a majority of my stuff is.
Yeah, she's got a great YouTube channel. She's stuff up like a lot, like pretty much multiple times per week.
And it's gonna get more. I just took on a full on co-host for the channel that's gonna do his own stuff. So it'll be, right now it's like 2 to 3 videos a week depending on the rotation of stuff, and then he'll have some more stuff, so it should be even more starting actually this month, so there'll be more content.
Oh wow, okay, cool. Awesome. And I've actually been on a couple episodes myself. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been on the influential horror episode, and then there's an episode where we talked about the newest Hellraiser movie.
Yeah, super fun conversations, both of those.
Yeah, I got to get back on there at some point.
Yeah, we'll do something. Yeah, we'll do something again soon for sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate having you on again. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, always.
Thanks again to Angel for joining me. On Friday, Devon Taylor joins me for Avengers: Age of Ultron. And on Monday, Donna returns to the show to talk about the Blade trilogy. Thanks for listening. Creepy and Geeky is a part of the Morbidly Beautiful podcast network. Please check out morbidlybeautiful.com/podcasts for more great shows. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast is Gratitude, composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and Blue Sky, and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.